And then they learn that, they can learn to let the experience of fear become finite, become very contained, let themselves feel larger than it. That's the feeling then people have when they're no longer afraid of their own emotions. They realize the emotions can be there, but they're bigger than those emotions. They're not submerged in them anymore.
Hey, this is Sharif here with another episode of the Golden Hour, joined by Dr. Kevin Majors. Kevin, I'm excited for this conversation here today.
Hey, Sharif, it's great to be back.
Yeah, Kevin. Well, as you probably know, it's Halloween today. And I think on this day in particular, people wonder, what should I do? What should I do in the evening? And one popular thing to do is to watch scary movies. And that's something I like to do, but I've found that when I propose that as the activity, a lot of people are kind of hesitant. So, what would you say to help people overcome that reluctance and to get people interested in watching a scary movie?
Sharif, it's a great question. And I think that scary movies give us a chance to learn everything we need to know about anxiety. So the whole theory of what is anxiety and then how do you relate to it in a new way, it can be tested and practiced by watching scary movies. So I have to say at the beginning, I'm not actually a big Halloween fan. And I'm very happy the idea of like giving sugar to children. But anyway, so I'm happy to turn the light off and let people walk by. But I've always been a big fan of scary movies. And in fact, my whole family is. And so when we get together, that's in fact what we most enjoy doing is watching these scary movies. What I found though in my practice is that basically 100% of my patients who come to me with anxiety disorders, if I ask them, what do you think of scary movies? They universally dislike them. And something interesting can happen then when you're working with people on anxiety. And so at first I just got to hear about this, that they watched a scary movie and they enjoyed it. And also it happened that friends that I knew that really dislike scary movies, eventually I would teach them how to use the scary movie as practice in welcoming anxiety, reframing it, and then being mindful of it. And they reported having a completely different experience. So I found that, in fact, that you can teach people basically everything. And when it comes to reframing anxiety and being mindful of anxiety and leaning into it by helping them to get the most out of scary movies.
I see. So you see scary movies as kind of like an exposure where if you struggle with anxiety, with fear, that you kind of immerse yourself in it by watching a movie, by watching one of these scary movies. And then through that process, you learn how to how to deal with it.
Yeah, because in fact, there's only one anxiety disorder, and it's where anxiety itself is seen as something disordered. So it's the fear of fear that's the essence of every anxiety disorder. So getting people over anxiety is really just a matter of changing the relationship to this one emotion. But I also found when I talked to my patients about their experience with anxiety and watching scary movies, this is a strange concept, but I'll try to make it clear. They experience it as like a kind of force field that they're immersed in. Somehow they're submerged in the emotion. So that it's all around them and it just feels like this is reality. And so when they watch something scary, they're like, oh, this is just too intense. Because they think that somehow it's like, well, they're submerged in the emotional experience. And people who love scary movies either don't have that or they're seeking that feeling. And so I think that there are really two stages as people learn to process anxiety. One stage is learning how to emerge from the emotional experience so you can hold it in your hand. And then the next is being able to voluntarily submerge back in it, seeking to be scared. And those are two different levels. And they're two maybe levels of how resilient a person is in the face of anxiety.
Okay, so those are two levels. Those are both good. Good ways of dealing with it. So at the even before that, there's a level where you're submerged in it, kind of against your will, almost like being underwater. You're struggling to get out, but you can't.
Yes.
So
And then they
that
watch
seems
the
to be,
movie through their hands, through the cracks in
yeah,
their
yeah,
hands as they're trying
yeah,
to hide their
yeah.
eyes.
Or you have to turn the light on, or actually, one thing I noticed too is that this is my personal theory. You can confirm or deny it, but that some people like make a lot of noise or kind of try to talk a lot, narrate what's going on, for example, as a way of uh, making clear that it's just me watching a movie. I'm not, so they kind of
That's
distance
right.
themselves from it that way. They just say, "Well, I just wanted to comment," but I say, you were too scared. You had to do it.
Exactly. And they will sometimes even laugh at the movie,
Uh
or
huh.
they try. And so all of those are what in psychology we call diffusion techniques,
Uh huh.
of running commentary or laughing or focusing on the people around you. All of them help you to get a little bit less tightly fused with the emotional experience. The problem is that the way they're doing it, they're still treating it as a threat. And so they're trying to prevent their own being scared from occurring. The more people try to resist getting scared, the more painful it is when it occurs. And the more echoes they have later on. So people who tell me that after they watch a scary movie, they have trouble sleeping, I think in my experience, it's always been the case that these are people who are really hoping to not get scared. They're really trying to not get scared. And then they get scared against their will, and it's terrible. So for everyone, there's a simple way of changing the experience of being scared. And if you can change it for a movie, you can change it for real life. So, and the way you do it is one, you have to reframe it as an opportunity for a new kind of practice. And two, that practice is being mindful of the emotion itself. So I think when people are submerged in an emotion, sometimes it's like imagine a person who's gotten hit by a huge wave that's taller than them at the ocean, and they're spinning around. They don't know what way's up. Well, that being caught in a wave, my patients with very intense anxiety identify with that kind of image, that's what it feels like. And I think that's what it can feel like even when people are watching a scary movie. They just they get disoriented by it. They're not like, what way's up? And so you imagine then that wave churning and spiraling and spiraling. And now imagine that it's shrunk to something instead of being submerged in it. Now they've shrunk it and they're holding it in their hands like a goldfish bowl that you can see through. And you can see in the bowl the swirling of the wave. So this is what happens when people learn to emerge from the emotion. And that is what mindfulness does. There's a clear neuroscience behind it.
So, Kevin, is that the same as that's different from the diffusion techniques where people are just you're emerging? It sounds kind of similar to diffusion, or maybe it is diffusion. It's another word that you're using for diffusion. But can you help distinguish that process of emerging through mindfulness, being aware that you're feeling this, versus the negative way that you mentioned?
The problem with like an unmindful form of diffusion, like comedy during a scary movie, is that it leaves the thing as a threat that they're really desperate to avoid. But in this case, you're using diffusion as a way of enhancing your experience of the emotion itself. So it's pro-emotion, not anti-emotion. But it's feeling the emotion physically, particularly in the tension in the very front of your chest. When a person can physicalize their experience of the emotion, they shrink it. And that's the experience they have of then like holding the goldfish bowl with the spiraling water in their hand. In that case, it doesn't matter how fast that water spirals. The more, the better, because you're feeling it from outside of it. There is a important shift in the person's stance towards the emotion where instead of being subjected to it, they have now objectified it. That subject-object line is really important for your ability then to experience an emotion not as a world-immersing event that is like just determining what's true right now, but just as a localized event, tension in the chest, a spiral that's happening there. As they do that, as they feel the emotion physically in the front of their chest, now it doesn't matter how high the anxiety goes. That sets the stage then for their ability to enjoy the adrenaline that they get with it and to look forward to whatever might be coming up that triggers it. So it just furthers the reframe. I think you can get to the point then where you want to be scared. So you're trying to fuse more. And it's almost like then you've reached the point where you jump back in the goldfish bowl. And now you're seeking to be kind of let yourself get tossed in the waves there because you have such certainty that this is not real, and this is just an emotional experience that you can have and that ends. So it's time limited. That's when people then learn to really enjoy throwing themselves into scary movies and trying to fuse with them. Yeah, watch them in a dark room, on a stormy night or on Halloween night if your doorbell doesn't keep getting rung.
So that's my favorite way to watch scary movies is I tell everyone, okay, no talking for the whole thing. I mean, zero talking, period. If you want to talk, just leave now, or watch it, in your own room or something. And then I try to sit completely still because like any movement, it creates a wall between me and the movie. That any time I move, it's like, oh, it's me watching the movie, but I want to be totally immersed in the movie. Yeah. So I try to sit totally still, totally quiet, and then I can just be there, like totally experiencing the movie. Is that kind of what you're talking about with submersion?
Yeah. So once you know how to emerge from the emotion and to feel it physically, and I have to just stress that as you physicalize the emotional experience as a tension in the chest, it shrinks and you enlarge. Instead of being a tiny thing tossed in this big wave, you are now the container. So mindfulness enlarges us so that now we can hold it. Then that gives you the security to then dive back in and deliberately submerge. And that's the fun of these things. So I think that it's a great training that these things, we know that they're not threats in themselves. We know that scary movies are a bunch of adults pretending generally. So it's like it's all pretend taking place on camera. So it's easy then, like with your rational mind, to see that in fact, there's no threat here, which makes it easier to dive back in then and to like let yourself seek being scared by it.
That's right. Okay. So Kevin, a thought just occurred to me. I mean, do you use this training for other types of movies with other emotions that might come about?
If people had a phobia of sadness, you could have them watch a sad movie just to get the experience of it. In my practice, I don't see a lot of that, but it's conceivable that people could. If people had a phobia of anger or of others being angry, then watching things, the movie just is recreating emotional triggers that you can then experience mindfully. So you can learn to see what's it like to have empathy for these characters. Presumably, you could use it to practice building empathy. But scary movies have just such a great kind of track record in terms of like they've really gotten good at pushing buttons. And they even do very complex things, I think, in terms of psychology, where they give you an artificial sense of safety and they build it. And then towards the climax, they take it away. So you can always tell that there are these, they kind of set us up so that when we were feeling safe, or by proxy with these characters we're watching, then suddenly we realize, no, it's not safe. So they've gotten, and then they make the threat seem worse and worse and worse. Like how evil the threat is gets scarier and scarier. So they do a great job of keeping on ratcheting it up. And I think that you don't even need to watch like a 2-hour scary movie. You could just on YouTube do a search for short horror movie. And YouTube has 3, 4, 5-minute scary movies. And so I actually tell this to my patients to grab one of these and then just hit play. And these ones are really good at getting right to a scary thing. And as you feel the tension rising and you feel yourself getting scared, when it gets to like a 7 out of 10, you can pause it and then drink in the physical sensation. And I say drinking because that's what it feels like, that that the anxiety gets projected by your amygdala into the chest wall, and it's going to feel like a tension right around your sternum. And as you inhale, just a natural size inhale, not too big, you'll feel it kind of pulling tighter. And then as you exhale, no effort at all on the exhale, just let it happen. You'll feel everything relax. Every inhale drinks in just a little, another kind of quantum of tension, and then it gets less. And as you do that, then the person's anxiety will pretty rapidly come down, and then they hit it play again. They can keep going through. So you can kind of, when you're doing this for practice, do it at your own pace. It doesn't matter how quickly you get through it. And then they learn that, they can learn to let the experience of fear become finite, become very contained, let themselves feel larger than it. That's the feeling then people have when they're no longer afraid of their own emotions. They realize the emotions can be there, but they're bigger than those emotions. They're not submerged in them anymore.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's an interesting approach. One thing that I find surprising is that I know the brain in some way maybe cannot distinguish between reality and a movie, or at least there's some way, like by submerging yourself into it, that you kind of work out the same parts of your brain, but also that if someone has, say, fear of public speaking or fear of heights, that's the same system in your brain as like a fear of, I don't know, some supernatural evil in your house or something. I mean, so it's all this, there's just one fear system, there's just one type of fear that all of this is working out.
I think that's right. So there can be different kinds of triggers for fear. So people have panic disorder, the trigger is a physical sensation that feels dangerous to them and leads to an oh no reaction. And then they get, because of the adrenaline surge they get more symptoms, which are really the symptoms of adrenaline or hyperventilating. But that happens in any extreme case of fear. So even if you're worried about something, like let's say that in 2 hours you're going to get a phone call that you are either going to be destroyed financially or you're going to become very well off. And it's going to be one or the other. Well, in those 2 hours, you're going to get more and more anxious probably. And there's a sense here that it could be great, but it could be bad. Well, in that case, it's the same idea. And in that sense, what the person is actually afraid of is not yet present, which means it's only present in their imagination, which is getting the call saying you've just been emotionally, financially destroyed, whatever it is. You lost the lawsuit or whatever. So in that case, then it's like they're actually, for those 2 hours until the call actually comes, is they're responding to something imaginary. But our amygdalas do it so seamlessly, going from the imaginary to the real, that we can't even tell when the transition occurs. And then something that we were afraid might happen actually happens. It's the same system.
So, Kevin, what is your favorite movie to do this with?
That's a great question. So it kind of depends on the sensitivities that people have. And some people have a kind of theological aversion to movies with the demonic in them. So now in that case, maybe they would have no trouble with Sixth Sense, or even just moving to something purely natural, like When a Stranger Calls. So there are these, movies that are, or Wait Until Dark, which is an old classic. So those movies don't have like the supernatural element in them. Just in case some people think that watching a movie about these things does something in the real world, and draws some kind of, attention to oneself that one wouldn't want to have. So at least in my practice, I'm not going to debate that. So I'm looking for like, what's the easiest win? I do think that movies like The Conjuring in that series, or Insidious and in that series, The Exorcism of Emily Rose is another one that's classic, that people can use that are great for training. Again, I try to stay away from movies that have like really adult content in them, because I think that just mixes up too many emotions and isn't really good for this work. And then movies that are sadistic, which I just find so distasteful. So I'm interested just in good scary movies, that is again just a bunch of adults pretending.
Yeah. Now, it just occurred to me also that uh, roller coasters can have this effect on people too. That as you kind of go up, it's like fear of heights. And so, do you also recommend people go on roller coasters, or is that now too much? That's like real now.
Yeah, I am totally happy to recommend people do roller coasters. So the issue is that for most people, it's just a little harder to get to the amusement park. And maybe they don't have kids the right age to be able to go on the roller coasters. So I just think that, but yes, it's exactly the same idea that, and this is where I say, like, you want to have the attitude in these kinds of practice sessions of the more, the better. Now, if you're going to go on a roller coaster and let's say you get locked in and then you find out it's a 2-hour ride with only 5-foot hills, wouldn't that just be awful? And it never goes over, 10 miles an hour. So that would be the pits. So, but what you're looking for is something intense that pushes the limits, that doesn't cause an actual stroke, but they're really good at making sure that these things don't create too high a G-force to actually do damage. So I think that the roller coaster idea, like people do it more intuitively get to this place of the more the better. And the roller coaster does reproduce a lot of sensations that people have in panic attacks. So I'm all in favor of that. Heights can do that and some types of climbing, but then you start to get into things that actually have more of a risk to them. So that's why I'm kind of hesitant on that. But with a scary movie, you really kind of want the attitude to be the more the better, bring it on. This is my practice. Because again, once the emotion has been physicalized and you're holding it in your hands, it's like the swirling fishbowl. It doesn't matter how fast it swirls. So because you're not submerged in it anymore. Or if you are, it's voluntarily.
Yeah. So Kevin, you must be very excited about the whole metaverse thing and virtual reality, because it seems like to watch a scary movie is one thing, but then you could actually put people into the experience of that exact situation. Again, no danger, but like a fully immersive. I mean, are you going to start using that in your practice?
Yeah. Well, in some ways, I do that in my practice when I help people do very deep visualization exercises, which are basically hypnotic. And you get them very relaxed. And then you go through they're called process images, but you help people like going down a set of stairs, one after another, after another, after another, an elevator going down and down and down. And you can get people to the point then where they're very focused, very relaxed. And then you can bring to life the thing that they're afraid of and let them really experience it. And that is a little bit like scripting horror movies for people. So I think if you can do that using just some rudimentary relaxation and visualization techniques, I don't really know what the metaverse would add, but hey, I'd be open to it.
Okay, good. Great. Well, hey, Kevin, I think we're basically out of time for today, but I don't know if you have any final thoughts that you want to add before we finish.
Well, one of the things that I remember I came across in reading Thomas Aquinas was he was asking of like the benefit of drama. And he said that the two most praiseworthy emotions to train yourself to have using drama are pity and nemesis. Pity is sadness at the affliction of the innocent, and nemesis is joy at the punishment of the wicked. And that made me think of my love for horror movies in a new light. I'd like to think that he would approve, and that these movies, they train us in pity and nemesis, and that's what the best experiences do. So maybe, in fact, there's like a positive shaping in our personalities that occurs as we learn to kind of practice in this unique way. But at the very least, they help people to have a training ground for anxiety that can't harm them and can reproduce all the sensations of regular fear and panic.
I love it. Kevin, that's a great note to end on.
Great. All right, Shreve. Well, happy Halloween.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We'll be back next week. Well, thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to check out OptumWork.com for a set of online tools to help you engage challenge in your life. See you next week.